It's child abuse. This is child mutilation. Like, stopping children's puberty is insanity. I never in my life thought that something like this would ever even be possible in a civilized society in the year 2024.
Dozens of protesters, from medical professionals to concerned parents, stood on the steps of the Supreme Court this week as the court tackles the topic of transgenderism. The case could impact laws in more than half the states in the nation. Welcome to EWTN News In Depth. I'm Catherine Hadro. The current Supreme Court is no stranger to hot-button issues, from abortion to affirmative action to gun laws. On Wednesday of this week, it took on another controversy in a historic first: gender transition treatments for minors. Reporter Roselle Reyes was outside the High Court.
Protect trans kids! Protect trans kids!
On a chilly December morning, dozens of protesters stood outside the U.S. Supreme Court in our nation's capital as it took on a controversial issue for the first time in its history: gender transition procedures for minors. This blockbuster case, called the United States versus Skrmetti, concerns Tennessee's law that limits medical procedures and interventions for youth who struggle with gender discordance. 3 teens who identify as transgender and a medical doctor, represented by the Justice Department and the American Civil Liberties Union, brought the case against the state. They allege the law violates the Equal Protection Clause by making distinctions based on sex. Tennessee Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti told EWTN News Nightly that the law protects children from gender ideology.
I think if you look at the record of the legislative proceedings that led to this law, in which the Tennessee General Assembly very carefully considered evidence, heard testimony, looked at developments elsewhere, everything about it is focused on kids and protecting kids' safety.
Within just a few years, concerns over the impact of gender transition procedures on youth went from a fringe idea to a top priority for Republican legislators. Including Tennessee, 26 states currently have restrictions on the treatments in the books, including puberty blockers, hormone therapy, and surgical procedures. The court's decision, which is expected next summer, could drastically impact these laws. Inside the court, a tense oral argument lasted more than 2 hours. A lawyer from ACLU who identifies as transgender, the first to ever argue in the High Court, spoke on behalf of the teens.
If you're someone who was born male and you are going through puberty too early, you want to be able to have a final adult height that is typical of boys. You may receive puberty blockers so that you can develop as a typical boy. Someone who has a sex of female at birth is also receiving puberty blockers so that they can undergo a puberty like other boys. And so it is the same purpose, and what makes the treatment prohibited for the birth sex female is their sex.
When sparring with the liberal justices, Tennessee Solicitor General Matthew Rice reiterated that the law looks not at the patient's sex, but at medical purposes.
I took the SG to be saying that it operates on the body in the same way. So what's your basis for saying they're not the same?
I don't think it operates on the body in the same way. Take testosterone. If you give a boy with a deficiency testosterone because he has constitutional delayed puberty, that allows him to go through and develop the reproductive organs associated with being a male. If you give it to a girl, it renders the girl infertile.
The conservative majority of the court seemed skeptical of the Biden administration's claim and expressed the issue might be best left up to the states.
And, we might think that we can do just as good a job with respect to the evidence here as Tennessee or anybody else. But my understanding is that the Constitution leaves that question to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor.
Stop the harm! Stop the harm!
Outside the court, the debate was just as heated.
I'm in front of the Supreme Court, and as you can see behind me, on one side you have a rally to stop the harm against America's kids, and on the other side, a rally to keep gender transition procedures.
And for many there, the issue is personal.
Because I grew up in the 60s and 70s with gender dysphoria, and grew up with a lot of shame. I remember being that 8-year-old that felt suicidal. So I'm going to be for that kid that's here today.
I'm here because at one point my daughter said that she was a boy, and every medical provider that I sought help from told me that I needed to transition her. I promised that I would fight for all the other children that are getting swept up in gender ideology. So I'm here today to support those who are fighting against this.
Detransitioner Prisha Mosley spoke in front of the crowd and told her story. At only 16 years old, she was given medication to stop her menstrual cycle. And by 18, she had her first surgery.
I'm here because I'm lucky or blessed. I was able to reconcile with my natal sex and be okay with that and heal from trauma and pain.
She hopes the Supreme Court will rule in favor of Tennessee's law and protect other kids like her.
I testified for this bill originally in Tennessee. I think this is a great bill. This bill not only protects children who are minors from consenting to procedures they have no ability to actually consent to, it also helps them hold doctors accountable. This isn't an issue of hate. It's love. I wish someone would have stood up and protected me. I wish these laws had been here.
Roselle Reyes, EWTN News In Depth.
For analysis on this historic case, we turn to two experts on the issue. Josh Payne is an attorney and founding partner at Campbell Miller Payne, the first law firm dedicated to representing detransitioners who feel misled by the promises of gender transition procedures. And Dr. Theresa Farnan is a Catholic moral philosopher and fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. She's a founding member of the center's Person and Identity Project, a special initiative to promote the Catholic vision of the human person and to respond to the challenges of gender ideology. Thank you both very much for joining us this week. Josh, I want to go to you first. Can you first tell us, what do you hear from your clients about their experiences with these procedures?
Catherine, thank you for having me tonight. Our clients tell cautionary tales, really, about going and seeking medical treatment for great distress that they were experiencing, oftentimes with a host of mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. Some of our clients were also experiencing being on the autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. And instead of receiving proper medical care that led them to a path of healing and understanding of their body and understanding of their sex, they were misled into believing that they could change into something else, something that they were not naturally born as, and that misleading information that they were giving was harmful to them because they lost their healthy natural bodies through the process of receiving either hormones or surgery, surgical removal of their body parts, or both in some cases.
Theresa, this is obviously a very charged and emotional topic. Can you explain the Catholic Church's lens on people who identify as transgender and on gender transition procedures?
Sure, and thank you for having us on here for this discussion. This is so important. The first thing to just keep in mind is that what we have going on here are two rival ways of looking at the person. So one way views the person as a unity of body and soul. That's the Catholic Christian anthropology understanding of the person, and that sexual difference matters, and it's the foundation of the family. And the goal for someone to flourish is to help them to learn to accept their body as a gift from God, right? And so the second view, which is the view that's proposed by these transgender activists and gender ideologues, is that who you are as a person is the sum total of your desires and your ideas about yourself and your feelings. And so they believe that the body has no intrinsic meaning. And in order to make somebody achieve some kind of happiness or euphoria, you need to surgically alter the body, regardless of the effect on the individual and regardless of the effect on the wider family, causing them to reject their sexual difference so that they can live as they choose without regard to human nature. So the church understands, Pope Francis has been on fire on this issue since 2014, and Pope Benedict before him. And the church understands these are suffering people who are being handed lies about the human person, and these lies about the person lead them to tremendous harm, right? And so the church's lens on persons who identify as transgender really is one of compassion. right? We understand that these are people who are suffering. We see their pain. We understand that. But we also know that what is being promised to them can never deliver, and that the treatments that they are being encouraged to pursue are ultimately going to prove to be grievously harmful, and that the only way to flourish is to accept the gifts, the gift of yourself, the gift of human nature that God has given you.
Josh, looking at this specific court case, can you clarify the specific exact question the Supreme Court justices need to answer? And what struck you from this week's oral arguments?
Yeah, is that from me or Josh? Go ahead, Josh.
The case is about a law that the Tennessee legislature passed, I believe, a year or two ago, to protect minors from these harmful procedures, because we know if someone does not have their brain fully developed, if they cannot appreciate dangers and harms and risks such as taking in substances like tobacco or alcohol, if they're not old enough to vote or be drafted into the military, they're not old enough to appreciate the long-term consequences of potentially losing things like their fertility or their ability to enjoy a sexual life, which many of these cross-sex hormone treatments and surgeries result in. And the question before the Supreme Court is, was the Tennessee legislature entitled to form the judgment they did that this kind of protection of children is necessary and important? And legally, the Supreme Court is looking at the issue from the vantage point of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, and whether the legislature improperly discriminated here. And Tennessee is arguing in support of their law that it was not improper discrimination, but that it was a reasonable regulation, in fact, to protect children based on their age, and that what Tennessee was concerned with here was not discriminating on the basis of anybody's sex, but protecting both sexes equally from harmful procedures.
Theresa, the mainstream media often portrays anyone who does not support these procedures for minors as cruel, even dangerous. What's your response to that notion? And can you succinctly give some advice for Catholics about balancing that compassion with truth on this topic?
Sure. Well, we have long understood that it definitely is not compassionate to allow someone to harm themselves, right? And so if you understand that by pursuing these treatments, these young people are engaging in medicalized self-harm, there's no way that Catholics can cooperate in that, because that ultimately leads to, harm for the person, harm for the family, ripple effects for everyone. And so I really think it's important for Catholics to understand they've got two missions here. They need to be able to proclaim the truth about the person. These young people who are hurting so badly need to hear the beautiful teachings of the Church about the integrity of the body, about the meaning of the body, about how God has a plan for each of us and it's unique. And then they need us to be saying to them, we care about you, we love you, and we love you too much to allow you to do something that is so destructive. Slow down, take your time, you are fine as you are, because God made you and he has a beautiful plan for you.
Josh, as our legal expert here, I want to get your reaction to an exchange during this week's oral arguments between Justice Alito and with the attorney with the ACLU. Take a listen.
Are there individuals who are born male, assigned male at birth, who at one point identify as female, but then later come to identify as male, and likewise for individuals who are assigned female at birth, at some point identify as female, identify as male, but later come to identify as female? Are there not such people?
There are such people. I agree with that, Justice.
So it's not an immutable characteristic, is it?
Josh, what do you think is the point that Justice Alito is trying to make here, and why is that significant?
Well, under the Equal Protection Clause analysis that the court has set out, the preliminary question is whether the person challenging the law is a member of a protected class of individuals. Classically, we think of any protected class involving people based on their race or based on their sex. And what the challengers were promoting was this idea of, can we add a protected classification of transgender persons as a new classification under the Equal Protection Clause? And Justice Alito in his questioning was suggesting that would not be appropriate because unlike a person's race or a person's sex, which is immutable, it cannot be changed, a person's transgender status can be changed because some people, like the clients that my firm, Campbell Miller Payne, represents, at one point in their life felt that they were a gender different from their sex, but then later they detransitioned and returned to identifying with their true natural sex. And that was Justice Alito's point. If somebody's transgender status can change, it would not be appropriate to create a new category under the Equal Protection Clause of a protected class saying that transgender persons deserve that status, just like someone, who deserves not being discriminated on because of their race or their sex. He said transgender status is different because it does change. It's not immutable. People do detransition, and you heard the challenger's attorney there acknowledge and concede our clients are real. They do exist, and people do change their mind, and that's why Tennessee wants to protect. And many other states, by the way, not just Tennessee. It's I'm not sure it's quite a majority, but it's over 20 states have these laws protecting minors because we know children and young people may grow up and change their mind, and many do, and many, the overwhelming majority, based on the research that's available, in fact, grow to reconcile with their sex in due time.
Well, we are especially appreciative of both of the perspectives you bring to this story this week. Thank you both. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you.
Thank you.